This is Vidya. I took this photo of her inside a brothel in Bombay's red light district. She's on the balcony overlooking the street where her mother and her friends sell their bodies for sex. All she can see when she looks out are more brothels. This is her view of the world. This is her destiny. This is the future of children like Vidya all over the world. Vidya will grow up to be a 21st century slave, unless we act. Deep inside the brothels of Bombay, I personally met the children who without choice were born into the sex trade. For sale. A local man inspects the goods of two teenage prostitutes in the marketplace of Bombay's red light district. Forgotten innocence. The corridor of the brothels is an unsafe playground for the children of the red light. Love is enough. Raj, only aged 6 years old, at the entrance of his mother's room in the brothel. Endangered sleep. A baby sleeps by her mother's bed in a brothel. Her mother will have sex with up to 15 men a night. It is also well known that children crawl under the bed while their mothers work. I was disturbed to see babies and young children inside the brothels. Reshma, aged about 6 years old, sits on her bed, which her mother will use to service about 15 clients a night. Reshma doesn't attend school, but spends her time running errands for clients that visit the brothel. Sometimes she just roams the streets, playing in the red light neighbourhood. This woman asked me, "Are you taking pictures to send back to my village?" Her shame was summed up in this one sentence. Most women are forced into prostitution by poverty. Some are kidnapped and some cheated. Many are trafficked from over the border in Nepal. Once a prostitute, your future lies only in this midnight world. Glory was rescued precious moments before being sold for £150 to a brothel owner, escaping a lifetime of sexual slavery. She is now cared for in Jubilee's homes for abandoned orphan children rescued from the sex industry. Around the world, millions of women and children are trapped in modern-day slavery. Sex slaves. It's a nightmare world, and very few escape. Shay Cullen has been rescuing young girls from the sex industry in the Philippines for over 25 years. He says, child prostitution is a crime against humanity and must be stopped. Slavery is illegal in almost every country on our planet. Yet the world's leading expert on modern slavery, Professor Kevin Bells, tells us that there are 27 million slaves in the world today. That's more slaves alive today than all the slaves stolen from Africa over 4 centuries of slave trade. True Vision's devastating documentary exposed the truth about modern slavery. These are the stories of the slaves today. Drissa worked on a cocoa plantation on the Ivory Coast. Cocoa that was made into chocolate that we all eat. When he tried to escape, he was savagely beaten. After his rescue, he told True Vision, "When people eat chocolate, they are eating my flesh." These boys were kidnapped and forced to work in the carpet industry in India when they were only 6 years old. They were made to work 18-hour days, kept in pain, hunger and fear to produce a few carpets that could be sold cheaply in the West. But they have now been rescued and reunited with their parents. Domestic workers are held captive, forced to work long hours, paid nothing and beaten badly. Dora was a domestic slave, but escaped and now works for the World Bank. Dalits, or untouchables, have been called modern-day slavery's biggest challenge. About 250 million Indians, that's 25% of the population, are Dalits, which means broken or crushed. They are considered less than human, victims of a caste system that has destroyed hundreds of millions of people through the ages and continues today. The slave trade lives on in places like Sudan. Amnesty International has reported that the regime has abducted thousands of civilians, mostly women and children, and forced them into unpaid labour in the north, in effect turning them into slaves. The same pattern is unfolding in Darfur, with the Janjaweed's regime of terror destroying lives. Yet the world fails to act. Bonded labour is the most widely used system for enslaving people, the poorest of the poor in Asia today. Men, women and children borrow money and then offer their labour to work off the debt. Some are tricked or trapped into working for little or no pay, sometimes 7 days a week. There have always been slaves. But the transatlantic slave trade was different as a racist ideology which was used to control the largest international business of the time and launched a new world order. It's transformed the world beyond anything anyone could ever comprehend. Over 4 centuries, Africans were kidnapped and became a slave labour force that drove a new international financial system. It created dynasties and fortunes for the slave masters in England, but destroyed families in Africa. African slaves serviced an international business enterprise that expanded the economies of all the slave trading nations. Essentially, the slaves of Africa developed European nations and contributed to their wealth and success. Slavery was the key to the making of the modern world. The slave trade ended for many reasons. The slaves themselves revolted, there were changing times in Europe, in Parliament, and investors looked elsewhere for profit. But the campaign in England played an important part. It was the first human rights campaign of its time. In 1807, Parliament passed laws ending the shipping trade, and 40 years later, slavery in its traditional form was ended. 200 years ago, slavery was dealt a blow, but it has recovered well. We need to revive the spirit that inspired the campaigners to fight the slave trade. We can and must play our part to fight the 21st century evil of modern slavery. Join us.